Yo, welcome to another episode of Under the Surface, a talk show where we talk all things Bazaar. I think it's not a secret that many of us Bazaarians feel that the power level of newer items is steadily increasing, and I suppose that I know what's the reason behind that. We are also going to discuss a potential strategy on how to remedy that. So without further ado, let's dive under the surface. Yeah, we would like to talk about the increasing power of the items in the Bazaar. In my opinion, there's not enough precision. I think there's lack of precision here. They are making the game, and I'm really glad that Tempo is making this game. They took the time out of their lives. They invested money, or Reynard definitely has. I'm not sure about other people, but there were some investors. But in general, I think this game was mostly driven by passion and not by maths. And I admire passion, I admire it. But when you are making such a game like the Bazaar, and we have an auto battler that is, item based, it's also a drafting game on top of that. So it definitely has been inspired by card games. There's a lot of connective tissue there, and it's also a strategy game underneath all of it. I feel like when you are playing a strategy game, you want to express that strategy, through your skills and actions. Like skills as in what you are able to do, your knowledge, for example. And in many cases, in the Bazaar, luck trumps skill. I'm not sure if you would agree.
Yeah, skill's obviously important, but there are times when, I don't know, because of the nature of the game, it's hard to put into words, but yeah, you can easily not play well and work things out in a way that in your favor just because you got a good enchant or got a good skill. You know what I mean?
Or a good drop simply from a merchant, right? So this shows us high variance of the game. And variance isn't bad in itself, but I think controlling the variance is important, so you know where the variance comes from before you even start the game. And this idea of RNG essentially is what I learned from Reynard himself. There are like 2 videos he made on RNG. I made a sort of card game myself. It's not very good. Like, it's not because the mechanics are bad, but because I made it so complex that a whole game takes about 4 hours to 5 hours, and essentially every turn is a person is playing 15 minutes solitaire and then passes the turn, and the person who played best solitaire wins. And playing that 15-minute solitaire is, in my opinion, brilliant, but yeah, I'm the creator. But yeah, it was too much. It was too much, definitely. But at the same time, like, I have some understanding about what goes into making a card game, and in this case, a strategy game that's sort of item-based, similar things. And I don't think that Tempo has really done their homework that well. Like, it's A-, something like that. I just want to add that this is just a bunch of observations made by me while playing the game for like over 350 hours, something like that. And I'm not trying to accuse anybody at Tempo they have done the job badly, or like they should have done something else from the start. No, I am glad that they have been trying things out, and I've been learning along with them. They probably have learned much more than me because I don't have the data. The main thing that I think should guide the power of the item is its size and its cooldown.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the baseline for our item. So I think we intuitively understand that a bigger item, so it takes more space on your board, should be stronger than a small item because it takes less space on your board. You have only 10 slots on your board. That's essentially your mana, in my opinion, though cooldown could be understood similarly. Yeah, in your 10 slots, you have to fill some roles, right? You need a win condition. Perhaps you need some supporting items to accelerate your win condition. Perhaps you have a more synergistic build that does a lot of smaller things at the same time. Perhaps you have a really tall build and you have one item that does everything and the rest is just there. And I don't really like that idea of making builds, but that's the reality we live in. And also we have cooldown, right? So the longer cooldown, the stronger the effect should be. That makes sense. However, I don't think that tempo is really treating those two outliers. That's the word, right? It's like a base, right?
No, outliers is like data that's on the fringe.
Okay, let's scrap that. Those two things should be the base for creating items. The size of the item should dictate its power and its cooldown. And in this situation, you could give, let's say, points as some value to those things, as a mathematical base to calculate the power level of your items. Obviously, like 5-second item with 10,000 damage is much better than the exact same item with like half that damage. You cannot make items like that just, by adding stuff on top of other items to find interesting, design, because that's how we get power creep. And I would argue that that's exactly what we have right now in the game. If we can gain value points, as in gain in the sense that that's our budget to spend, so with getting bigger slots and longer cooldowns, we would spend those points by adding keywords, tags, and other effects like damage and shielding on those items, right? That would make sense. That's how we would calculate average power level of the item. Adding more keywords, more tags on the same item, I think should be like for increasing costs of those points. It would be rarer to find items that do many things from, let's say, the same category. So an item that does normal damage, poisons, and burns, and perhaps even freezes. There are items like that in the Bazaar. Perhaps not all of them, but like, for example, burn, poison, freeze is depth charge, blank slate. There are things like that in the Bazaar. Without having like this mathematical principle behind all of this, and it doesn't really need to be like exactly precise, but like at least some rough estimates of what everything is worth would be preferable in my opinion, which I understand if you don't do that from the start, it's really hard to calculate that afterwards, and I've been rambling for almost 10 minutes. Great. But if you don't make those calculations, then by designing cards or items based on your feelings and vibes can lead you towards like outlandish effects, right? Because you want to make exciting cards, but you are not really mindful of the fact that certain effects should not be put on the card at the same time. On the item. I'm going to mix those up.
Yeah, I mean, cards, items. I know they're called items, but it's hard to... they feel like cards,
I mean, Reynard is very adamant about calling them items, and yet sometimes calls them cards. So,
I didn't think about it this way when I was writing up notes for it, because, I get what you're saying, and I do generally agree how you're saying, like, with the points values and basically balance is the beginning of the process, and there's no way on earth that's how they're doing it here. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely a vibe. Like a guy says like, oh, this should do this because it's a flamethrower, it should do this amount of fire damage, and then they try to balance it after the fact or whatever, is how I assume they're doing it. Who knows how they're doing it, but it certainly feels that way. And the power creep is definitely happening, and nobody is going to deny that, I don't think.
Yeah.
Every new expansion that comes out, for the most part, is pretty dominant. My thought was like, the power creeps, I would say, is kind of fast in this game too. I don't really know if that's true, but it feels like it compared to other games like Hearthstone, which I know it's a different game than Hearthstone and everything, but I didn't feel that power creep back in the day to this extent so quickly. But the seasonal cadence is quicker here too, and all that stuff. I don't know. I don't see it as much of a problem because I always thought like they could just rebalance eventually, right? But that's a lot of extra work.
It's very good that we are in digital medium. There's like possibility to just, change the text on the cards and, to clear things up. Yeah. I wouldn't worry about that part. I'm more concerned about the fact that, as you said, it's more about vibes. So like making exciting cards is cool. Like, let's say you have a weapon and then, well, it's kind of boring. What if we add freezing to it? Ooh, it's cool. So how about we make like Sword of Ice and Fire so it burns and freezes? Wow, what a brilliant idea. And you start slapping effects on top of the item, and then, it's really cool. It's really fun to use. But like, is that what this item should be? In the sense that, is it going to warp, the meta that we are right now? And I think like Railgun is a good example here, because it wasn't like really over the top, but the main part about it was really easy to assemble. It was bronze, and it had really good scaling. It went from like 100 to 250, 500, 1000, something like that. And then it had charge on top of it. Charge is really scary mechanic in my opinion. The fact that like 1/3, 1/4 of the items have charge right now is like we're close to coming back to charge meta. In my opinion, the fact that you could put your railgun, you could get it on day one even, and you just put your railgun to the right, you waited for level 3 to get either critical core, weaponized core, or the core, and all three worked, given, of course, that critical core was the best. And then you just put whatever to the left, like literally any tech item, and it worked. Of course, there were better hits than some. It was so easy to assemble that we ended in the situation where at least a third of the ladder was just railgun dually. And I don't blame people for it. Like, I got 2 perfect runs with railgun dually, because like, why wouldn't you do the easiest strategy that is available to you and you get almost certain 7 wins? You have to be really unlucky to not hit 7 wins with that at the height of its power. I know it's nerfed now. Yeah, charge is another way to sort of scale the item, because when you put charge on the item, like, its cooldown is more of a suggestion.
Yeah, we've seen this OP item meta happen quite a lot too, especially in the closed beta. But like, I mean, anybody watching this right now can think of one item that they just hate because it was so oppressive.
Armadillo. I think you could tell us whole novels worth of rants about Armadillo.
Yeah, I was thinking monitor lizard, because that one just sat there for like a year. Well, not a year, like a month, but still, it's like a year in the Bazaar. So
yeah, exactly. Like, great point here. Okay, yeah, I guess that's another point that I would like to make. Charge and haste are incredibly common, and when they are put on an item that can scale in any way, I think that's just bonkers busted, and I don't think like that's a good way to go about making the game. Was that a correct sentence? That's not a good way to go about making a game. I think it was.
Yeah, Bellista is another one that does that.
Yeah, exactly. There are examples here left and right. That's my point. I think that there should be more like clear-cut division between win conditions that are offensive, win conditions that are defensive, and supporting items. Of course, there could be some overlap. They don't need to be like exactly like one of those 3 categories. When you put them in a pot and just start mixing, like, you get items that can run away with the game. Like, I think the freezing mag, based on relics, was something like this, and you still can find some relic mags that do much more than I think they should be able to do. Freezing mag, like, second into the fight, pew pew pew, and you are frozen out of your mind. There's like this relic, like, it has regeneration, and every time you regenerate, it gets more regeneration, so like it can scale off of itself, and then if you enchant it with any damaging enchantment, then you have infinite combo that just machine guns your opponent to death. If you want scaling, it shouldn't have acceleration, and vice versa, in my opinion. That's why we get to charging meta, and that's how we get Christmas lights on our screens. I'm sorry, I just looked at the time, and you are just listening to me ramble. Like, it was meant to be a discussion.
I've popped in a couple times. I'll pop in here. Like, I do generally agree, and I mean, I get what you're basically saying is that the design is at tempo is very fluid, right? Like, it's just kind of like, it's the vibe thing. And the thing I will say about this game is I'm more curious to see how this is in a year versus now, because as the pools get bigger, are we not going to see, like, even if an item is super oppressive, is it going to be really hard to pull off the build you need with it most of the time? You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that like the scaling and the items that scale and charge are like the worst, the items that always become super oppressive normally, right? Like you were saying. But if we have a dually pool with 250 items or something eventually, does it matter too much if that item exists? Because you will run into it, but surely it'll be very minimal compared to now, where like, Freeze Mac exists and he has 110 items or whatever, and every third person's Freeze Mac.
Yeah, but that's not exactly what I was talking about. So maybe I was not precise enough. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. What you are talking about, I think, is exactly what I want the game to be. So if we separate some effects into piles with some crisscrossing but not much, supporting items would be could have this charge and haste, but I think if they would charge or haste, they couldn't win by themselves. They can't be the win condition. They can help the win condition, but if they are charging, they shouldn't be scaling. So I like that some items are strong, but to be oppressive, to go to that level, to be unethical, you have to help them. They cannot be unethical just by themselves. If item does too many things at once, there are too many those protrusions to add another puzzle piece. That was terrible metaphor, but like pen, pineapple, apple, pen. You get one item that's fairly good but doesn't win you a game by itself, then you get another pretty good item that doesn't win a game by itself, and then you combine them. But if one item wins the game by itself or is able to connect to so many items that it doesn't really matter what you are running, it's still good because it will work with whatever you will get, then I think it's too much.
I understand what you're saying now. I get it. And I generally agree. Like I said, I just come at it from such a different, you're coming at this from a game designer perspective, and I came at it from I don't know, just a player who likes the vibes. So I really like the vibes of a lot of the items. Yeah, you get the problems we get here, right?
Right. I mean, we both know you're a gambler at heart and you like your dopamine hits. And I do not want to forgo that. It's not about having vanilla creatures just bouncing off of each other and just playing essentially war with cards. Do you know the game War that you play with playing cards? Yeah. So the higher figure wins, right? So I don't want that because that would be boring. I think being more restrictive towards the effects that an item can get can, first of all, limit the number of situations where after 4 seconds, suddenly all of your items go off and then it's just Christmas lights. And also you can be more particular about how your items interact. And then there's more skill expression in putting this engine together. You have to be really knowledgeable about what pieces fit and how they will, affect your build.
I get it. No, and I generally agree.
Cue Danny DeVito meme. I get it now.
I'm curious. I would really curious to see what actually happens behind the scenes at Tempo in terms of card design. I wonder who starts that process. Is it do they just have art for a card, then they're like, okay, what's it do?
I think it's the other way around. From the early videos, I think the main designers were Reynard and Ben, and I think they just came up with cool effects and cool items like objects to add to the game, and then they try to fit them together. When designing a card, and if you want to have a flavorful game on top of that, you just look at that item and you think to yourself, well, what's the real use of that, and how can I translate that to make the game mechanic imitate the real life use to some degree. Then if you can get that, then making the art for the item is just you go to the artist and say, I want this item in this scenario at this angle, and the artist just draws it.
That makes sense. The other thing I wanted to add to this whole thing was that I'm shocked how quickly they're adding new major mechanics, I guess you could say, the whole quest thing, which I haven't interacted with that at all, so I can't really speak to how it is. But I don't know, I'm kind of shocked to see that existing in the game, especially in season 3.
I mean, I like the mechanic, the idea is really clever, but when you add too many quests to your items, then we arrive at the issue that I explained earlier, where the particular item does too many things at once, and then it can fit in various builds, and also much more items and skills interact with this particular item. So if you have some scaling options, then things can start feeding off of each other, and you again arrive at Christmas lights.
Yeah, I guess my only like comparison really that I can think of is Hearthstone, because it's like the only other game I played, and I like that's a card game type thing that's live service, because this is the problem. This is like a live service unique problem, really, right? Or like in Magic or something. I don't know. Going from 2015 Hearthstone or whenever I last played, the 2024 Hearthstone was like two different games because the power creep had just kept happening. And I don't know, it was just insane to experience. So I don't know if that excites me or worries me about the Bazaar. Do you know what I mean? Like, you get new features and they sort of nullify the old ones, but the whole point of this game is that it's ever expanding.
Yeah, and we are coming back around to my thing about slots and cooldowns being worth points from which we can derive power level for our cards or items. Without that, there's no way to keep a steady level across upcoming expansions, right? If you would keep making cards based on vibes, then the only vibes is excitement. In that's what it feels like. And if you want to have like only exciting cards in your game, do I even have to comment on that?
Just go gamble.
Exactly. Like
the expansions kind of are all just like exciting, like not necessarily, but that's kind of what they're meant to be. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think that you should be excited about. I mean, you shouldn't be excited. Being excited is pleasant. I don't deny that. But this contextual understanding, which was promised, was, I think, lost along the way. It is doable to just take items that are just good on their own, assemble a pile of them, and just roll through the game and win. Because your items are just good, and because they have enough effects that overlap, they interact with each other to some degree, and if you have appropriate skills, you don't really care.
Yeah, you sold me quite a bit. I mean,
I know.
I have no experience game designing, so...
as kids say these days, I have Riz. That was bad.
That was a little bit painful, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I mean, I definitely sit on the other side of the spectrum a little bit more than you. The complaining about power creep is real, and the single items that go insane are real. And you pretty regularly look at an item and think, how the heck did this get through? Yeah, like basic testing.
Exactly. My point about there not being any maths behind the game. I understand that things can be above average, below average, and making, let's say, rare items a bit stronger, like recent legendary relics. It's really cool to go through the jungle temple expedition and as a reward get a strong item that you can build around. But none of them really win by themselves. They need a setup, and that's precisely what I think we need from the Bazaar.
Agreed.
And
this is getting kind of long. So
we are above 30 minutes now, and I sort of have another thing to add, but I guess it's not going to add that much, so I'm just going to summarize it, as in everything that I told you about items is also applicable to skills. There's so much variance across skills that I would think that they are also totally made by vibes and not really compared against skills that already exist.
Yeah, skills might be worse, at least at points, like with shield bash and things like that.
I mean, they were nerfed a couple of times, so like if you get like charge 1 second 4 times somewhere in the first 15 seconds, sure, that's your skill, that's gold, I think, gold level skill, and that's all right. But sometimes once in a blue moon, you will get like, when you lose, just resurrect. And well, you just doubled your health bar just like that. Isn't that a bit of isn't that high variance? And also some skills just have infinite loops just inside them. Like the skill that adds the burn when you poison and adds poison when you burn. So if you have both on your board, then just... I killed myself once because I had like burning rapid injection system, and suddenly I started poisoning myself for 1000. Yeah,
Oh,
right.
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was rather fun. And also a lot of skills just straight up double your output, while others just add like 10 to 5%. I don't know.
One thing you notice is like with skills or items that are super OP is they get like a lot of times they'll get like nerfed, but not nerfed enough, and then they'll get nerfed again the next time, and then they'll get nerfed again, you know?
Yeah.
Like a lot of games will nerf like something's good and then they nerf it and it's like the worst item in the game. This game doesn't really do that. I mean, it does sometimes, I'm sure, but there's so many instances where they just like nerf it incrementally for some reason.
I would say that it's good that they are not afraid to nerf items, and sometimes buff them even. So we are not, left hanging. So I guess like response time is cool. Like that's a cool part of the
Yeah.
game. Yeah. To summarize the whole almost 40 minutes, I think the design needs to be more precise. Then that's it.
As long as I can get my fix, I agree.
Sure.
It's like I get that boulder game,
Yeah. So I think that would be a good place to stop for today. Yeah, I got everything out of my system. If you agree with me, leave a like, leave a comment if you don't agree. Both are good. You may even subscribe while you're at it. And yeah, thanks for watching. I feel drained.
Thanks. You let out a lot.
Yeah. Thanks for watching again. We'll see you all on Thursday on Blake's channel. And yeah, I guess that's it. So bye.
See ya.